You mentioned SB 277, which was I think it was a 2015
Correct.
California bill that repealed the personal belief exemption for the childhood vaccines. And then following that, a couple of years later, was SB 276, which limited the medical exemptions. So after
Correct.
the personal belief and religious exemptions were repealed, the only thing left was for parents who did not want to comply with the vaccine mandates as to any or all of the vaccines, was to get a medical exemption from their physician. And you mentioned representing some doctors who were writing some exemptions who were come after by the medical board. And so SB 276, I understand, was the legislative response to that, to limit the medical exemptions that doctors could write. They had to comply with basically the CDC guidelines, had some other limitations in it. And I wondered, that all struck me as creating a bit of a tension between public health and private practice of medicine. Public health being, public health officials always, they look at demographics. They don't know the names of any patients. They don't have any patients. They only have the entire millions of people in the public that are their charge. Doctors don't have the public in their charge. They have individual patients. And so there's a little bit of a tension there. For example, the AMA Code of Medical Ethics says, it has a provision, the patient-physician relationship, that says that the relationship between patient and physician is based on trust that gives rise to physicians' ethical obligations to place patients' welfare above obligations to other groups and to advocate for their patients' welfare. And it goes on to state that, quote, a physician is ethically required to use sound medical judgment, holding the best interests of the patient as paramount, end quote. So that will set the public officials who advocate vaccines on grounds of public health seem to have a little bit of a disconnect with doctors who I think ethically cannot advocate for vaccines just because it advances an important public policy. They have to justify the administration of every individual vaccine on the basis of whether it's going to help the individual patient before me. I wonder if that struck you as it does me, as a tension between public health and private medical practice.
Yeah, I'm going to put that AMA quote in my brief that I'm going to submit next week. Thank you.
Well, no charge.
But that is the fundamental problem, because it's not just public health officials, it's doctors, which in California seem to take the position that consideration of the public health is a factor in the standard of care, which it really shouldn't be, because it's unethical. And this is the argument that we've been making in all these cases, that, the only obligation of the physician is to do what's best for the patient. And really, considerations of public health cannot be, you can't consider them, especially, and remember what's going on here. I mean, this whole SB 277 was a result of this measles outbreak in Disneyland. And there were 177 cases, something like that, no fatalities. And I think they eventually showed that almost 40% of the cases were not wild. They were really symptoms of vaccine. So,
I think, are you referring to the phenomenon of shedding?
Well, yeah, it could be shedding. That's right. So there was only 60% were wild, right? I mean, they did genomic testing, so that's exactly right. So that caused this whole removal of the SB 277, and the bottom line is, you are right, in my opinion anyway. There's a fundamental tension, because a lot of the justification for childhood vaccination for diseases like polio. Polio is a case where they don't have wild polio anymore. It's all vaccine induced. You have diseases for which an individual has an extremely small percentage of succumbing to the disease, and yet they mandate it for everyone and their people, according to the folks that I represent and their followers, where the risk to vaccination is much greater than is recognized by the medical authorities as embodied in the federal CDC ACIP guidelines or the Red Book guidelines. Because vaccine adverse reactions are underreported. And typically when you go to your doctor, you call your doctor, says my kid has X, Y, or Z, they'll be told that's all right, have them take 2 Tylenol and we'll be better in a couple of days. And that adverse event never gets reported or recorded. So that's the thinking, I mean, that's the position that they have. And most of my clients say this in one context or another. My only job is to consider the patient. I cannot consider the public health, and these conditions of these patients are such that, vaccination is not in their best interest, at least compared to the risk of contracting these diseases, most of which either do not exist in this country or are not fatal. That's essentially the position. That's their position, and I advocate that position. I'm a healthcare lawyer, right? And I have some feelings, personal beliefs, which I don't really express all the time, but that is the argument made.